When you're doing the work on yourself, it's so important to take inventory of what's working and what's not working. And most of the time, it's about plugging back into yourself instead of plugging into the world around you for all the answers. The real answers live inside yourself.
Welcome to Women Leaders on the Move, a Her C-Suite radio podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Benamou, and every week I bring you interesting and inspirational stories and insights to help you with all areas of your life and your career. I'm also the founder of Her C-Suite, a powerful network of ambitious women helping each other meet, engage, and thrive in meaningful ways. And we offer mastermind programs and our special networking only program with office hours with me and guests on the show. Visit hercsuite.com and find out about Women on the Move and our mastermind programs. And I hope to see you there. Today's guest, I am so excited to introduce you to because she has helped transform my business into something that is going to truly serve you and our community. Megan Van Buiten is a coach, and she's also a co-CEO and head of mindset, performance, and leadership for People Conduit. She handles all of the coaching and programs at People Conduit, and she brings nearly 15 years of leadership consulting and performance coaching, as well as recruitment to People Conduit. She has proven track record of success in talent acquisition and employment, branding and change strategy, and building high performance teams across multiple industries. And today we are going to talk about building your business and what you should and shouldn't be focused on. She has really helped me through the exercises that we talk about. And I think as entrepreneurs, it's important for you to know that having a coach like Megan will 10x your business and make you feel more fulfilled. So let's get started now. Megan, I'm so excited to welcome you to Women Leaders on the Move today. Thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Natalie. How are you?
I am so excited to peel back the curtain. I think for entrepreneurs listening or for women leaders listening, you may not always know what's possible. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today is what's possible when you unearth these things about yourself, which I have learned working with you as my coach. But before we dive in deep into those things, I always like to start with a little bit of how you got into the work you're doing today.
I have been on a transformational journey probably my whole life. I think my real transformation started back in like 2017, 2018. And I think a lot of people go through this where it's like you're in your late 30s, mid to late 30s, and you're asking, okay, I did all the things that I was told to do, and my life isn't necessarily really what I want it to be. And I'm not totally aligned and fulfilled to what I want. So I think at that point, I got to the point where I was like asking myself the question, there's got to be more to this. How am I here and how do I have more like fun and joy and fulfillment in my life? And so it took me on this journey of uncovering things about myself, going on kind of a self-development journey and starting growth groups and masterminds with other women and investing into myself, my own journey and my own experience, and then really diving into coaching others. I've always been kind of a natural born leader and coach throughout my career. And it's just something that I kind of fell into because it's kind of who I am.
And you started a business. So you left your corporate roles, both you and your partner. So talk a little bit about that. What was that like? Was it super scary for you? And that's where our journey started. But I want you to talk about how you got together with your partner, and then we'll talk more about what came next.
Well, it was definitely an evolution. I had always been in kind of the human capital space, always connected to people. And our company name is actually People Conduit. And when we came together, I saw something very special in my business partner. And we were both top performers within the industries that we were in. And we just kind of came together and we went through a little trauma bonding of some unfortunate things that took place in a corporate environment. We grew, we learned a lot about ourselves throughout the process, but we also learned what we were willing to tolerate and what we weren't willing to tolerate. Learned a lot about people, a lot about leadership, a lot about cultures, what belongs, what doesn't belong. And then we decided to go off on our own and create something the way that we wanted to create it and partner with heart-centered leaders and organizations and people that really want to make impact in the world. And it's all just kind of taken shape in a very organic, fun way.
And you're about to come up to 2 years, right? Or you just celebrated?
I think we incorporated about 2 years ago. So we're just celebrating the 2-year mark, and it's been like this really organic, free-flowing thing that's taken shape. And we look back at what we've built and we're like, wow. And although we're really, as entrepreneurs, sometimes really harsh on ourselves, it's taken shape in a really beautiful way with beautiful people and, making impact in a lot of places.
Well, I think that's the first thing is that when you own your business, you have a critical lens about, wow, whether it's things that you're doing or, profitability or revenue or impact. And I know I myself am doing it all the time. That's stuff that you and I talk about. And so we came together in a really unique way. So one of her C-suite members, Ann Ford, introduced us. And I didn't know, you reached out to me and you're like, hey, Jackie's going to be, so Jackie Niemer is your partner.
Yep, she's in New York.
Yeah, she lives in New York. And you're like, hey, she's going to be in town. Let's meet for breakfast. And I thought, well, that's kind of a unique thing to do, but sure, let's do that. So we met, and there's, for our listeners, sometimes you meet people and you just have, there's something that you're going to do together because there's this ability to see that there's great things in shared synergy, but you aren't always sure. And so we started talking, and then I came to you and started to be your client as a coach. And it's been such a transformational journey, really, truly, and diving deep into personal beliefs and things that block us. And so as part of that process, you sent me a podcast to listen to.
I still remember this.
But the person shared things in a way that I wasn't as receptive to because of the way that it was being phrased. And so we got inspired to come together and talk about the concept. So I'm going to turn it to you and say, what is that concept and why is it so important? And it has been transformational for me, and I'm still a work in progress for our listeners. But what was the 3 things that you wanted me to learn from that podcast?
I love this question. So when I initially sent you the podcast, the way that I operate with all of our clients is take what you want and leave the rest. But the idea is I want to get you thinking about how this relates to you and how you show up in your own life. And the podcast that I sent you was all about identity. And there's a formula that I think is the key to how I work with our transformational clients and the people that really want to unpack the things that are no longer working in their lives and align to the next timeline that they want to actually be on. And so the intention of sending the podcast to you was for you to really identify, who are you right now? What are the stories that you're telling yourself? And what is like your identity? And so, who are you is a pretty broad question, right? But the way that we see ourselves as humans is a lot of how we actually, it's a big part of how we operate and we show up in the world. And so, the concept in the podcast that I provided you is that you can't outperform your identity because basically we are the stories that we tell ourselves. Our identity is sometimes shaped by the world around us, the people and experiences that we have from the time we're born. Our ego is kind of like, our thinking mind is like developed after the age of 7. And so a lot of what our identities are driven by are through the experiences that we have like really early on. So from like 0 to 7, your subconscious mind is actually formed, and that's where your identity is actually created. So think about this, Natalie, and I mean, we've talked about this in great detail. Sometimes people's identity are not even their own. It was created by someone else and shared experiences with others. So you can only imagine if someone doesn't take inventory of their identity in their life and they're just continuing to go through the motions of what was given to them, and then they're coming to a place where they're not fulfilled, there's probably a reason for that.
Yes. It's a lot of deep work. I mean, I think as entrepreneurs and as anyone that has made a big shift in their career. So for me, I was in my career for almost 3 decades, which is a long time to identify career-wise with that. There was a lot of success and a lot of changes, but still success for the most part. The hockey stick was in an upward direction. Becoming an entrepreneur in the pandemic was certainly interesting and intriguing. But to me, I always say when doors close, windows open, and doors big time closed on trade shows, which gave me the permission, as sometimes I think I was looking for, of like, well, you're about as low as it's going to go. So just fly through the window now, finally, will you? But there's beliefs that you have, like you said, and you can get stuck in the doing, because if you're an entrepreneur, how many things did I have on my list when we took a look at it? I think it's 54. As part of one of our exercises, in the doing piece of it is like, well, what is really important on the 52 things? Everyone does this, I'm sure. You have lots of things in your mind, and how do you get down to like the 3 that are really important? But the doing is where you get stuck. And if your identity is kind of stuck there with you, it's super hard to get out of it. So some of the work that we've done is around that being, doing, having. And that's really what I'm excited for our listeners to hear, because I think it's going to free them up. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. And so it kind of comes back to what I talked about before, is that your subconscious mind is like your crew within your brain, and your conscious mind is like your captain. All right. So the captain is like all about doing, but the crew is all about the being. As humans, we're programmed to operate from this model. And so really kind of think through this. So I'll give you an example. So let's say someone wants to go and become like a specialized physician, and they go to med school, and they have this vision for how they want to live their life, and they do all the things that they're supposed to do. They get the grades, they get into the great medical school, and they do all the things that they're supposed to do. And then they end up being that physician, and then they end up having a career as a physician. Okay. The way that this other model works when you're looking at your identity is that a lot of times we're waiting for permission from others to actually be the person that we want to be, because we're looking for that outside validation from the world, because we were taught that doing the things that we're supposed to do, and then being the things that we're supposed to be through the doing, if we're operating from that methodology, it's hard to break that cycle. But the idea is, with this other part of manifestation and coming into the essence of who you are and having more fulfillment in your life, you actually have to get really clear around your identity. So, who are you right now? Do you like the person that you are showing up as? Is this the career that you want to be aligned with? Are you fulfilled in what you're doing? And then the question is, what at the beginning of our conversation is like, who are you? And the thing is like a lot of people in the world right now are not fulfilled because they're not actually leaning into who they actually are and the energy of who they're actually meant to be. And so if we're looking at it from a doing, being, having perspective, and we're not checking ourselves for what we really want to be and allowing ourselves to align to this new way of living, which I'm going to explain in a second, it's like you have to really identify who you are right now. And if you don't like who you are right now, who do you want to be? And then getting very, very, very clear around what it is that you want to be. And then once you identify those things, you simply just give yourself permission to be that. And that's like the biggest breakthrough I think that we have with our clients, is like, no one in life is asking you these questions. And it's hard to ask yourself those questions because you're on the hamster wheel of doing, being, having. So once you give yourself permission to really align to the being and allow yourself to be that, whatever that is. I mean, like, you want to go be an entrepreneur, then go be an entrepreneur. You want to align to the more authentic parts of yourself and be a great public speaker, then go be a public speaker. Get into the arena, get uncomfortable, give yourself permission to be that. And then you do all the things that align to the doing. And when you align yourself to the doing, it supports the being. And then when you do that, you have what you want more quickly because you're aligning to the truest nature of who you actually are or what you want to be.
I think, the further you go, you get into habits, things that come naturally to you. You do them on repeat almost sometimes where you're on autopilot. Well, I've got a meeting, I've got a podcast, I've got these things. I know I can nail it because I know how to do this. And maybe that's not the identity of who you really want to be. And I'll give an example to our listeners because for 4 years, her C-suite, I was not the front of the brand. I was in the background. I always put members, which I value so much, at the front, and also programs and other things. And I made this conscious decision at the end of 2024 and into this year. I am the brand. I am the brand. And I gave myself permission to do it, which was scary. I didn't like it. I didn't like having my picture on everything and like, here you are. But it's like being comfortable in recognizing that it's okay to do these things, because I think we tend to tell ourselves there's these voices in our head that says, well, no, you shouldn't do that. The crew is like, forget it. You should not, because, what if?
I think that one of the things that we talked about in this particular podcast that you didn't like, and I can use this as an example myself, right? There was a comparison to like Oprah, and you were like, I don't like the way he talked about that. And I was like, totally get that. You can leave that, But I can use this as my own example in my own journey to coming back to myself. Like for a long time, like I realized this past year that I use my weight as protection from people. So like I'm a very bright, sparkly person. And it came to my knowledge through some personal development work that I was doing that I was using my weight as protection from people. And when I had that moment and I came to that like knowing that my subconscious mind was actually doing that, I saw myself as a heavy person. Whether or not it was serving me or not serving me, that was my identity. And so through the process of being and seeing myself and loving myself for where I was in that moment in my identity, I was able actually I've been able to like release weight this year because my subconscious mind is now knowing like you don't have to use your weight as protection anymore. Like you can be in your body, you can have attention and it's okay. And then I started doing all the things that aligned with this new part of me being a healthy person in my body. And then I'm starting to have an experience of being a slimmer person. And so the whole key concept is I can't outperform that until I start to really lean into the identity of who it is that I want to be. And it's okay. I learned it's okay to be slimmer in my body.
Which is amazing. And I cheer you on for just all the things that you're doing for yourself personally. And this is why I wanted to do this episode for our listeners, is to realize we're all intertwined. You can't really segment. I used to always segment, my business, right? Well, where I worked, with my personal, my family, the school where my girls went to school or whatever. It was all like in these little silos. I had like the silo for this, the silo for that.
Sounds a lot to manage.
It's a lot to manage, but it all made sense. But it was, yeah, it's a lot to manage. And in the end, it's all interconnected. So once you realize how can you really be in that space of being, it's so liberating. And I have just been so grateful for the work that we're doing together. I just feel lighter. I feel positive. I don't wake up with dread, not that it had anything to do with my business. It was really more personal, right? That you feel this weight, but you're not sure why. And I do think that once you kind of understand how interconnected everything is, like your work and who you are, to bring it together, it makes such a big difference. For our listeners, if they're thinking, well, I understand this, but what's one thing that they could think about today that they could just be curious about? Because this is a process. It's not 5 seconds. So it's not something they're going to be able to do in 1 minute. But what is just a mind shift that they could start to think about from always doing to elevate themselves?
I heard this analogy once and I thought it was a good analogy. And I use this a lot with when I start to engage with my coaching clients. Like, again, the programming, how we do the doing, being, having, We also, as humans, tend to try to plug ourselves into like, I'm going to go on this diet. I'm going to have this quick fix. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to, be in this group because it's going to make me feel better or like whatever it is. So we're always trying to like plug in naturally to the world around us, thinking that that's going to solve our problems. And when I heard this analogy, I was like, I like this because instead of like trying to plug yourself into the world around you and the people around you and the things around you and the things that you think are going to make you feel fulfilled, literally just making a conscious choice to be like, no, I think I'm going to try to plug myself back into myself. And what does that look like? The fulfillment and the answers for all people that we work with come from inside themselves. Our deepest wisdom comes from inside ourselves. I think what people can do is really start to just take pause and take inventory of what do I want to be? How do I want to like shift my reality? And like, how can I plug myself back into myself? And I can't answer that question for people. Sometimes it is through like working with a coach and having them extract the information so you can plug yourself back into yourself. Sometimes it's listening to podcasts and then doing journaling based on the podcast that you listen to. It's about literally like asking yourself the questions of yourself to find the answers that live inside of you. And sometimes it just comes through like meditation or just starting a meditation practice for like 5 minutes a day and learning to build that muscle and moving out of the stages of judgment that we all judge ourselves when we start a meditation practice. So there's a lot of things out there that can be done, but it's always about coming back home to yourself. And whatever that looks like and whatever channel that looks like for you, I suggest tapping into that and figuring out what that looks like.
But I want our listeners to know at the end of the day, you matter. You should always feel valued. And we want you to take something away from this and know that you're worth the work. You're worth taking the time. If people want to learn more about the important work that you do personally in coaching, but also that People Conduit is doing with organizations and heart centered leaders, where should they go?
You can go to our website. It's peopleconduit.com. Both Jackie and I, our direct emails are on our contact page. Feel free to reach out to us. Reach out to us on LinkedIn, whatever organically gets you connected to us. But most importantly, we just want to come together and learn how to make the connection with anyone that we work with.
And for our members, you can connect in her C suite because you're both in her C suite, which I'm so grateful for. I've had such a great time talking to you today. Thank you for being on the show today.
I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for spending your time with Megan and me today. I really enjoyed the conversation. For you to be able to hear how I have been developing using an amazing coach like Megan Van Buiten, and also how you can think differently and get unstuck where you may be holding yourself back, which is something that I discovered I was doing. Please visit hercsuite.com to find out about all the programs and the support that we give women in the second half of your career. As always, if you found this helpful, I would really love it if you share it with a friend or colleague. Help her out today. Help her know that she's valued and that this episode made you think of her. Keep shining your light bright. The world needs you.